Heal Me by Embrace the Insectric on AO3. Chapter 13. In truth, Dabi just wanted everyone out of the room. He hadn't lied when he claimed he had experience with patching up injuries, so Compress would leave and sending Toga and Twice out on that errand was actually needed. But Dabi just wanted the room to be clear so that he could be alone with the kid. They were clearly getting nowhere with their patched together arguments for why the kid should join them. Combine that with Shigarachi's bitch move to disintegrate his arm, and the fact that a room full of villains was probably the definition of intimidation, and yeah, they were getting nowhere. Dabi was the one to suggest recruiting Midoriya in the first place after seeing the video, and he figured their best chance of actually succeeding was him taking one-on-one with the healer. He took one look at the kid's arm and immediately moved to undo the restraints, keeping his hands together. The metal was uncomfortably close to the exposed flesh, and trying to treat the injury at such an awkward angle would be a pain. He wasn't being cocky when he told Compress he felt confident enough to be alone with the healer. He was exhausted and with no combat quirk, and sure enough, even with the restraints off, he stayed on the couch and made no move to escape Dabi's grasp. The person I was with when you took me. Did you... Dabi looked up from where he was inspecting Midoriya's arm, surprised to hear the kid speak. He had been silent since his ideal pleads for everything to stop, and Dabi had intended to at least give him a few moments of quiet before speaking a conversation. He looked back down at the healer's arm, taking note of how it looked slightly better than it did a few minutes ago, and distinctly wondered if he could heal his own arm like Compress had suggested. Did we kill him? Dabi replied, finishing Midoriya's question, which caused the kid to flinch in response. Dabi contemplated lying for a moment before deciding against it. Nah, the brat tried to fight and get you back, but we knew not to respond to his questions. He realized he had no chance without his quirk and ran like a bitch. Losing a witness who would no doubt run back to the heroes with a report wasn't ideal, but it wasn't worth to chase him down when they already had their target. He ran because he was smart, Midoriya snapped, in a quiet voice. He glared, challenging. There it is. There's that confident venom that Dabi has seen in the video. He worried it had been lost or pushed deep down inside him after the stunt Shigaraki had pulled, but it seemed like it could be coaxed out with the right words. Dabi had to be smart about this. Push too much, and the kid would end up hating them even more than he already did. Push just enough, and he would redirect that anger towards something beneficial. So, this was fun, little secondary effect of your quirk. Dabi crippled, changing topics as he lightly dabbled on the wound with antibiotic ointment. Dabi knew from experience that this ointment stung like a bitch, but for his credit, the healer hardly flinched. Did you know this would happen? Yes. Dabi paused and looked at Midoriya, who was staring slightly off into the distance. And you still healed me. Midoriya's glaze slid over to Dabi's, and the healer gave a small shrug. His movement only slightly stiffed Dabi's light grip on his arm. You were in pain, he replied, simply, as if the answer were an obvious one. Dabi returned to treating his wounds, and silence fell between them for a few moments. There's a lot of people in pain because of heroes, Dabi murmured. Enough, Midoriya groaned, clearly fed up with having this debate. Come on, what's the hold-up? Dabi continued, deciding to press his luck a bit more. You already agreed with me that there's heroes out there who probably deserve a little punishment, or at least don't deserve the position they're in. He pulled away the antibiotic ointment and relieved some bandages from the kit. Here's out. Stick around for a bit. See what it's like on the other side. You kidnapped my boyfriend, Midoriya interrupted. Dabi's brows furrowed as he looked up at the kid's face. He looked tired, either from his patience wearing thin from the constant cell pitches or from experiencing so much energy to heal. He wasn't sure. Whatever it was, clearly the exhaustion was making the healer start to lose coherence in his argument. I'm sorry, we did what? Dabi questioned, with a spectacle shake of his head. I don't know what kind of business you think we run here. We don't go around kidnapping boy. Dabi paused, the pieces coming together in his head as he thought about the list of people they had kidnapped. Wasn't exactly long. No way. No fucking way. Dabi looked up at Midoriya, who seemed to be starting to regret that he had said anything at all. The explosion quirk with the anger management issues? You're one to talk, Midoriya replied, looking a bit offended. You realize it was a mistake telling me that, right? Dabi pointed out as he began to wrap gauze around his bandaged wound. That's just another piece of information we could exploit. Information to exploit? Midoriya murmured, and Dabi could feel the eyes of the kid on him as he finished wrapping the gauze and tied a knot in the end. What, like the fact that you're a Todoroki? It was a good fucking thing that Dabi had finished wrapping the brat's arm and let go, because his hand suddenly caught with a burst of blue flames that sputtered out as quickly as they appeared. It was a reflex, a knee-jerking reaction that Dabi couldn't control, and he cursed the fact that he couldn't, because when he looked up, the healer's eyes were wide and curious and staring right at him. Oh my god! That was honestly just a guess, but for a hardened criminal, you don't hide your body language all that well, Midoriya murmured, as he now stared at Dabi like he was some novel science fiction discovery. Holy shit! That was a guess? Dabi shot up from the couch and moved to the opposite side of the room as if physical distance would help prevent Midoriya from noticing any more than he already had. Why the fuck would you guess something like that? What do I have to lose? Midoriya shrugged, his eyes tracking Dabi's movements, never blinking. Might as well spout nonsense and see if something sticks. Dabi shot him a glare that said an answer like it wouldn't cut it. He hated the way the kid was watching him now. The exhaustion was still there, but it was like a switch had been flipped in the healer's mind, and now curiosity was overriding everything as the prevalent emotion. Dabi could tell his movements were being watched even more closely now, as if every little twitch was a line in a book and the brat was piecing together the full story bit by bit. Midoriya's eyes were too inquisitive, too perspective, and Dabi didn't know what to do. Bullshit. You don't just pull shit like that out of thin air, Dabi argued. My livelihood outside healing is strategy and quirk analysis, so I know a thing or two about inherited patterns, Midoriya explained, and suddenly Dabi understood why the kid was staring at him like an experiment. That and those eyes are pretty damn familiar, almost like I've seen some shade wherever I look at my best friend. You don't. And the Todoroki family is missing a son, aren't they? Shut up! Dabi snapped, his hands once again thinning in blue flames as his temper and anxiety flared. You have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe not, Midoriya corrected. He slumped back into the couch, his fingers lightly stimming over his newly bandaged arm. He didn't seem satisfied or smugged with the information he was potentially unearthing. He just looked tired. But I know about Endeavor. Shouta told me plenty about that mess. Don't say that name, Dabi growled. Which one? Midoriya countered. Dabi opened his mouth to reply before snapping it closed. Apparently just existing in front of this kid meant secrets would be spilled, so clearly speaking wouldn't help the situation in the slightest. He could kill him, but he can't kill him. As risky and annoying as he was to keep around, the brat needed to stay alive. Shigaraki only saw a benefit in his quirk, but that wasn't why Dabi wanted to recruit him. Midoriya could have been quirkless, and Dabi would still have wanted him. This one was different. That had been obvious from the video. He thought differently from the other idiots his age who blindly idolized their heroes. More importantly, it seemed like he had the guts to actually act. It was a good baseline to build off of. Shigaraki fucked up the plan more than he knew when he derailed into manipulating the kid into using his quirk. Shigaraki only saw a tool, and tools don't need to like you. Betraying trust and manipulating emotions would only cause Midoriya to hate them more. They didn't need to be pushing him away. They needed him to agree with their ideals. The two stared at one another for a few moments before Dabi made his way back over. Regardless of whether or not he wanted to be near the damn brat, he was still a potential threat and clearly a bit smarter than the average teenager. He sat down to put the restraints back on, but quickly forced to reel back, narrowly missing the hand that Midoriya had raised towards him. "Don't fucking touch me," Dabi warned. He decided to abandon the restraints for now in favor of sitting on the opposite end of the couch. Midoriya let his stretched-out hand fall and rest on his lap. His gaze was fidgeting between Dabi's chin and his arm, and Dabi recognized that pattern well enough to know that the kid was purposely staring at. "Do those hurt?" Midoriya asked. "The burns?" Dabi checked, and Midoriya gave a small nod. "They're old. It's just scarring at this point." Dabi's eyes narrowed. "Don't even fucking think about it." "Think about what?" Midoriya questioned, and he almost seemed genuinely confused as to what Dabi meant. "Don't play dumb," Dabi pressed. "You want to try to heal them." Midoriya's brows furrowed. It's as if the outstretched hand and curious assessment had been an instinct, and he was just now realizing there had been a subconscious plan behind it. Dabi watched as the healer shook his head and clutched one of his hands with the other, like he was trying to keep them in place. "Scars are more complicated than recent injuries," Midoriya told him. It's why your arm is still scarred where I healed it. I've tried targeting scars before, but it never really worked out for me or the patient. It's like the body doesn't want to let go of them, so they always return." He shrugged again and looked down at the scars that littered his own arms, and Dabi suddenly noticed how many there were. "The body wants to keep its evidence." "Then why would you keep trying?" "Because I can," Midoriya replied, simple and firm, and almost rehearsed. "Healing quirks are rare, and if I don't try, then I'm wasting it." "Where the fuck did you come from anyways?" Dabi questioned. They hadn't actually gotten much background information on the kid before deciding to grab him, but from what they had seen, he never wore a uniform like the rest of the heroes in training. "You weren't a UA student." "Island," Midoriya answered. Conversation was flowing surprisingly easy between them now, like they were two old friends catching up over lunch. "Lived there since I was 5. "That floating city full of scientists?" Dabi asked, genuinely familiar with the name. "They sent you here to train as a hero?" "Not really. It was my idea to leave," the healer clarified. "I fought tooth and nail for it. Pulled out every argument in favor I could think of to make the case. They would have preferred I stay there and use my quirk for research and gear development, but I didn't want to do that." "You could have lived a cushy life in one of the world's most secure places, and you left?" "All I could do there was use my quirk in experiments," Midoriya explained. He was idly picking at the dry blood that had crusted underneath his nails by touching Toga's disguise. He didn't seem particularly bothered by the fact that it covered his hand. "I wanted to make a more direct impact." "So you came here to use your quirk, which hurts you to use, in a field where not having a combat quirk leaves you highly exposed and at risk for more injuries, and so far, you've been kidnapped by villains." Dabi huffed out a laugh and nodded his head. "Bet you started regretting leaving." Not at all. What the fuck? Are you a masochist? Are we sharing things now? Midoriya had perked up slightly, even turning in his seat so he faced more towards Dabi. Because I'll talk if you do. I'm not talking about my past, kid, Dabi said, tensing as he saw the curious shine return to the healer's eyes. Is Endeavor the reason why you want a clean state? Midoriya pressed, completely ignoring Dabi's words. Are you selectively death or just a bitch? Dabi drawled. He could feel the threat of spark in his hands and once again cursed how much his control seemed to have been tossed out the window because of one kid. I said I'm not talking about it. You never technically agreed with me that you're a Todoroki, so I'm not technically asking about your past, Midoriya reasoned. I'm starting to understand why you're dating that explosive quirk brat, Dabi said. You're both obnoxious as fuck. I'm actually worse than him. He just has less of a filter. Dabi stared at Midoriya, and the kid stared back. Where had the fear gone? It had been there before, mixed in with all the bravo and duration that Midoriya had tried to push forward when he faced a room full of villains. It seemed to be gone now, or at least it was too far muffled by the exhaustion and curiosity that fought to take center stage. Dabi could easily drag that fear back to the forefront, but instead, he found himself taking a deep breath. There are more just like Endeavor. He's not the only one, Dabi told him. As much as he didn't want to talk about what the kid wanted to talk about, he could still see ways he could spin the conversation in favor of the original plan to persuade him to their side. False heroes who care more about image and payments than the fucking people they claim they protect. There needs to be change. Why couldn't change come in the form of the newer generations? Midoriya argued. Heroes retire. They get replaced by little brats who were raised and trained to think the exact same way. Shouta doesn't think that way. Dabi's eyes twitched, and a small gleam in the kid's eye said that he had figured out that yes, that was the name that Dabi didn't want him to fucking say. Will you just fucking drop it already? Dabi, we're back! Dabi shot off from the couch again, and the sound of Toga's voice. The girl in question skipped into the room as cheerfully as she had skipped out, a plastic bag hanging from her waist. We found these protein pouches and some... Toga trailed off when she caught sight of Dabi, who no doubt looked as tense and uncomfortable as he felt. Are you okay? I'm fine, Dabi told her, trying his best to keep his voice even and to fall back into the more leisurely posture he was known for. Are you sure? Twice asked, as he looked pointedly at the undone restraint sitting next to Midoriya on the couch. Dabi hesitated and glanced around the kid, who was looking back at him with an unreadable expression. It was true. Dabi had never confessed to anything, but what was keeping this brat from sharing his little theory on Dabi's history? The healer's eyes slowly slid from Dabi over to Twice and Toga before the corner of his mouth curled into a wary smile. I was telling him gross medical stories, Midoriya shared. He slowly and gently picked up the restraints and slipped his hands into them, all ready to have someone re-secure them as he sighed of good faith. Thought he'd had the stomach for it, but I guess not. Ooh, tell me some stories, Toga excitedly requested as she hopped onto the couch and pressed herself against Midoriya. Twice moved around to the other side of the couch and locked Midoriya's restraints. Is there any blood involved? She began to remove snacks from the bag around her waist, but stopped when she noticed Dabi walking towards the door. Dabi, where are you going? We've got some snacks here too. Out, Dabi answered, not bothering to turn around as he made his way out of the room. I'll be back later. If Shigaraki complains, tell him it's payback for the arm and that he could fuck off. I love this chapter mainly because Dabi and Midoriya talking and realizing they have similar ideals but completely disagree on the solution is very interesting in my mind. Personally, I agree with Midoriya's solution. It would work, and it would be permanent. Obviously, there'd be a couple heroes here and there that, you know, are kind of shit, as in the sense of like human shit, like they're literal piece of garbage or a dickhead, but it wouldn't be the same as how it is now. And don't get me wrong, Dabi's idea and his solution would work. But the problem would surface again if you don't acknowledge the problem. That's the thing about the hero society. It didn't start with the heroes. It started with society. You know? The whole society views of how quirks work and just society itself is the root of the problem, and if you do not change societal norms, it will just grow back like an ugly pimple on a Monday morning. I don't know why I said that. As always, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, have a nice day or night. Join our community server, link is in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.